Okay, we're ready to start. So my name is Maarten Ectors. I'm the VP of IoT for a company called Canonical. Canonical is most famous for its product Ubuntu, which is #1 in the cloud and also for IoT. This session is about how to maximize IoT and big data for business and government. I'm going to talk about anything from how to boil frogs to leap a frog, and I'll explain you what that is in a minute. So, boiling frogs. This is the term used by the British intelligence headquarters for an internal research paper that was published on GitHub. The term comes from, if you put frogs into boiling water, they jump out immediately. But if you put them in cold water and then start very slowly augmenting the temperature until it starts boiling, then by the time it reaches about 40 degrees, the frog goes to sleep, and at the end you're boiling frogs. And that's the same story for a lot of companies that get disrupted by software. Basically, they are into business. Every day it becomes harder and harder and harder until they find out that like software has just completely disrupted their business. Where have we seen this? Well, we've seen this already happening a couple of times in the last year. So Blockbuster got disrupted by the likes of Netflix. The app stores disrupted the Nokia phones, and Kodak got disrupted by digital cameras, and afterwards by the phones inside your mobile. So who's next? Well, there's not a clear list, but every major brand, every big corporation is at risk of being disrupted. And it's very interesting to see how Microsoft did a survey very recently, in which top executives in the top companies are all saying that like about half of their revenue is at risk of being disrupted in the next 5 years. So disruption is a very big issue for large corporations. And why is it that they can be disrupted? Well, most of those corporations focus on sustaining innovation. That actually means that they're focusing on markets that are already existing, in which they can go to customers and ask them what they want, and they can apply traditional business methods, and that's sufficient. Now, what we've seen in last years is that there's something like disruptive innovation that creates new markets for problems that are not very well understood, and for products that customers don't understand and can't initially give clear requirements for. So the market becomes completely unpredictable, and traditional business methods cannot be used. Now, as a good example, think about the cloud. Lots of customers weren't asking for the cloud, so they couldn't give requirements to the existing companies, and things changed dramatically for those that could create a new market around the cloud. So disrupting existing markets, it has become ever and ever easier than before. Creating new markets isn't that easy, and that's why big corporations have a hard time competing nowadays, because their existing markets are being disrupted, but they haven't gotten into a way of creating new markets very easily. Now, what are some of the major trends that are currently happening? Well, everything is offered as a service. Compute and storage is offered as a service. Software is offered as a service. Driving is offered as a service. Think about Uber. Airbnb is offering rooms. Netflix is offering movies as a service. And we're seeing that hardware is basically getting less and less valuable. Where in '98, Google had to spend around $35,000 to have like a server. In 2013, we saw the Raspberry Pi come up that had better specs and only costed $25. But if you now look a year and a half later, it only costs $5, and the specs have improved. So the hardware cost is very fast tending to go towards zero. That means the value no longer is in the hardware. Where is the value? Well, the value is in the software. And we also see that a lot of artificial intelligence, deep learning, AI, and all types of like big data solutions are coming up everywhere. And for the first time, an algorithm has won from humans in a game called Go. Go is special because it was one of those games that was universally predicted as not being able to be beaten by a computer. Scientists thought it would take years, even decades, before a computer could beat any Go player. But this year, it has happened. Another major trend that has just happened is the DAO. Now, for everybody that is not familiar with it, you probably are familiar with Bitcoin, the cryptocurrency. Now, the reason why you can't double spend a Bitcoin is because it's based on a distributed ledger. And this distributed ledger is by itself used to store contracts, and distributed ledger is called blockchain. So in this blockchain, you can put contracts that can be automatically executed. And a good example of an open source ecosystem that does this is Ethereum. Now, with Ethereum contracts, you can make something called DAOs, distributed autonomous organizations. What this means is you can make an organization that is completely running on code instead of driven by people and processes. And the start of this new revolution was very, very tormented, very initially successful, but then it went a little bit bad, in the sense that the first DAO that was launched, called the DAO, basically was allowing people to put a cryptocurrency in and get tokens. And then the idea was that startups that wanted to do something around smart contracts could go to the DAO, present their idea, and people that had tokens could vote on which idea was worthwhile to invest in, and automatically those companies would then get money. It was a little bit too successful for a very early project because they raised 200 million worth of digital currency. And unfortunately, there were some security issues, and hackers were able to steal about 50 million of those. And as such, there were like a couple of reasons why the DAO wasn't successful. But the major trend is there. Smart contracts that do things automatically are here. We can already see it that in banks, you have robot advisors, you have high frequency trading. So it's just a matter of time before we see more and more smart algorithms doing things on behalf of humans. Another major trend is that of Internet of Things and putting apps on things. This is part of a crowdfunding campaign that we did very recently called the Lime SDR. The Lime SDR is software-defined radio that is app-enabled. So you put this into any computer and you put an app on there, and through apps you can make it do any wireless communication. So put a Wi-Fi app on there and it can become a Wi-Fi hotspot. Put a 4G app on there and it becomes a mobile base station. Put a 2.4 gigahertz app on there and you can use it to control a drone. So this is the future of wireless and software defining it. But in all these major trends, we can also see that like some governments are really innovating outside of their boundaries. The Estonian government with their e-identity, which is a digital identity card, is a very good example. You can go to any Estonian embassy, present your passport there, pay $100, get some pictures taken, get your fingerprints taken, and then they'll give you a digital identity card. With that identity card, you can now become a virtual resident of Estonia. What does this do? Well, through very intuitive websites and APIs, you can create very easily a company. You can set up a bank account in minutes. You can pay your taxes. So you can be completely running an Estonian company from the other side of the world and trading with people all over the world. And this is the way business in places that is difficult to do locally can be done and is being done. So back to where we're all focusing, Africa. How can Africa leapfrog all the other continents? And I want to Africa or leapfrog Africa, so leap a frog. And when I'm thinking about leapfrogging, I'm not thinking about taking some of the innovations from other countries like wind turbines, smartphones, or solar cells and putting them in Africa. I'm thinking a lot more faster and better can be done. So let's look into this. And for that, I want to introduce something which is called the constructive innovator. My last session was about disruptive innovation. Here, I want to go a step further and focus on converting innovators into constructive innovators. So let's explain how that works. So first of all, I already told you that like software is starting to define hardware. You can see it on your mobile phone. 5 apps on your mobile phone, and immediately the functionality changes, and it can control hotel room reservations, car reservations, flights, and a lot more. Now, put the software-defined radio that we saw a couple of slides back into other things like a projector. What happens? All of a sudden, you can do new things. You can do basic things like use it as a Wi-Fi point and a projector. You don't have to have 2 devices anymore. You can use it as a mobile base station. So if your projector is in a place where you don't have good coverage, all of a sudden you have coverage. But you can use it for all kinds of things. You can use it to see what a drone is seeing, and with hand movements that are using your from your smartwatch, you can be able to control what the drone sees and project it on a screen. So why is this important? Well, through apps, we can redefine what hardware does. So if top innovators can now create apps that they can provide to large corporations that are being disrupted to create jointly new revenues, then we are getting to constructive innovation. Why do you want to do that? Well, you want to do that because if you are a startup and you want to be disruptive, you are going to have to make your own Bitcoin ATM and fight all the banks. That is going to be a very hard thing because that is going to make sure that you have to go and compete with everybody. Now, if you are going to be a constructive innovator, imagine that you want to help a vending machine vendor. Imagine it's Coca-Cola. What happens now, if you can bring an app to Coca-Cola, to their vending machine, that allows somebody that has Bitcoins on a mobile phone to just touch the vending machine mobile payment reader and transfer coins onto the vending machine and give them money in return, then all of a sudden you can see that a vending machine becomes an ATM. Why would Coca-Cola want to convert vending machines into an ATM? Well, if they put a Coca-Cola vending machine in a very remote area in Nigeria, then they have to go every week to get Nairas out. Those Nairas often have to be transported locally and then exchanged and sent abroad. That's a very risky and expensive process. So wouldn't it be easier for Coca-Cola if an innovator came along and just exchanged Bitcoins for Nairas, and as such, nobody had to go to the vending machine, and Coca-Cola would get a revenue because they can get a commission on all those exchanges. So all of a sudden, what used to be a cost becomes a revenue. That revenue can be shared between the innovator and Coca-Cola, and as such, both will win, and that innovator will probably have their app on vending machines all over the world in weeks. So taking this further, everything can now be a bank. If you just think about the point of sale in the store around the corner, by putting an app on there, you could have this ATM functionality, but you could also use it to deposit money. You could even have crowd loans being approved in a minute, and as such, the cashier could give you a loan that is subscribed by a crowd lending platform. Add identification like an iris scanner, a fingerprint scanner, and it becomes a full notary service. And if you think about putting an app store on those type of devices, then you can see that your imagination is your limitation on what is possible. Now think about the Lime SDR I presented before. You can put all types of apps everywhere. So you can go and start running your own base station and become your own telecom company. And as such, you can also have your app store doing all types of use cases. Now, if we add all those things together, if we take a vending machine and we allow it to also sell SIMs, recharge that SIM, and have a Lime SDR and an antenna in there, so it becomes also a base station, and allow mobile payments to be done, at the end, this becomes a retail telecom banking federation. And this type of things could create a new economy in which lots of innovators can go on site this like platform, create new and new use cases that will make M-Pesa look like a version 1.0, whereas we're now multiple versions further. If we take the same approach for the healthcare, how can we get universal cheap healthcare? Well, what if we offer people a chance to have a very inexpensive health insurance, but unlike what's happening in the US, you sign away your rights to sue for millions, but in exchange, your home or your village get a health kit. Then you're able to connect to offshore doctors that can help you. You could even see that machines could be guiding you through the steps of now check your pulse, now put this in your ear, now put this in your mouth, move it a little bit, and so on. Think about a health kit together with a mobile phone, and you can have doctors on the other side of the world providing services. You could even have African doctors providing healthcare for everybody else in the world. At this moment, healthcare is extremely expensive. This type of technologies could change the healthcare system substantially. If we want to go a step further, what if whoever knows how to create an MRI scanner, instead of like selling it very expensively, puts the design on GitHub and allows any low-cost manufacturer to create an MRI scanner? But you're only getting the hardware. If you want to have the software for it, you need to work with the App Store from the designer. And as such, designers no longer care about like building the hardware. They can be built on cost, and they care about like bringing valuable new apps that can detect all types of diseases that a whole ecosystem of partners can create. So instead of a startup making a whole new MRI scanner, which would be very hard to do, they can focus on one specific disease and how it can be better detected. They could even use the MRI scanner for completely other use cases. So this is the examples of how we can create MRI scanners that could be in every African hospital at an exponentially cheaper cost than what we currently pay for MRI scanners. Also, energy can be innovated upon. What if we open source the designs for anything from wind turbines to solar cells, make it super cheap to make them, and make a software ecosystem on top and have the power there? So by open sourcing all these energy solutions and letting others build software solutions on top, you're able to create a completely new set of energy solutions and completely new markets. Now, bringing this all together, how can we create a new African economy? Leapfrog. Well, there's three steps that we need to take. First of all, any African country that wants to be part of global business needs to be open for global business. And the best way to do it is to just copy what works in the rest of the world. So if Estonia has an open source solution for e-residency, why not just implement it as well? If Delaware allows you to, for a couple of hundreds of dollars, open a business on a website without ever having been to Delaware, why not allow that as well? If the Irish tax system is very positive towards like opening your business, but still means businesses need to pay for employee taxes, that means lots of businesses come that employ lots of people. Why not make very business-friendly laws? And why not make them more global? Why not put them under a Creative Commons license so that other countries can also copy them? And perhaps there could be a general set of business laws that lots of countries take as their framework for laws. And as such, you can then go to the next part, because justice that is late is not justice. So if you have a common set of business-friendly laws, you could also have a common set of automated law enforcement processes. If you get a product from me and you don't pay me, I shouldn't have to go to a judge and wait 3 years for you to be obliged to pay me. I should go to a website, show that like I've invoiced you, show that I've delivered the product, and you then should only have like 2 weeks to provide proof that there was a problem with the product or something else. If you can't, then automatically the payment is deducted from your account. What would this bring? Well, all good companies would immediately get paid. All bad companies would go bankrupt. What we've seen in a lot of crisis countries or countries that had crisis in the last years is that the opposite was true. Bad companies didn't pay and made good companies go bankrupt. Another thing that is also on lots of people's radars is corruption. We could fast track corruption and make it so that like if there is corruption, whoever reports it gets a percentage of the fines. As such,